The federal government has announced what it calls the first step in reviving the Trans Mountain Pipeline project. It follows a ruling last month in which the Federal Court of Appeal quashed the approval of the $7.4 billion pipeline expansion.
Today, we are announcing an important part of our plan that will help us move the Trans Mountain Pipeline project forward in the right way. We are confident that with this plan, will allow us to meet the high standards that Canadians expect when it comes to protecting the environment.
CBC's David Cochran's tracking the details of this story. He joins us from our Ottawa bureau. What more can you tell us about this, what they're calling the first step now?
Yeah, Rashmi, the first step of what will be several, because the federal court stopped the Trans Mountain expansion in its tracks on two specific grounds. One, that the National Energy Board had failed to consider the full environmental implications of the pipeline expansion, in particular with increased marine traffic and the impact on whale populations and the environment on coastal British Columbia, and that the federal government had not properly consulted with Indigenous groups for their concerns on the pipeline. This announcement today deals with one of those, the environmental concerns. So what they've announced is that they're asking the National Energy Board to redo its review of the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion and take into consideration the impacts of increased tanker traffic due to the increased oil supply going to the British Columbia coast. And as part of that review, they're going to supply the National Energy Board with the details of what they've done to mitigate some of these risks already, including the details of their $1.5 billion ocean protection plan. And they're also going to appoint a marine technical advisor to the National Energy Board to make sure that they have the expertise they need to make a proper assessment. Now, all of this has to be done in 22 weeks, which brings us to late February, and at that point the National Energy Board will rule whether the project should go ahead or not, or recommend whether it should go ahead or not based on these additional findings. What wasn't there today was any clear plan on how to deal with the Indigenous consultations. Minister Sohi was asked about that today, and he essentially said, stay tuned. Take a listen to what the minister said.
I want to be very clear that no relationship is more important to the government and to Canada than the one with Indigenous peoples. And our government remains committed to finding the best path forward with respect to the court's ruling, and will set out our next steps on this shortly.
So shortly, could be next week, could be the week after, but we are expecting something soon. I mean, there are big questions there, Rashmi. Who is going to lead these consultations? Will it be a judge? Will it be the Prime Minister? Will it be a cabinet minister? How long are they going to take, and when will they actually start? The time is of the essence here because of the construction season next week, and while the government is committed to dealing with all of these concerns, it also bought the pipeline and it wants to get it built, so it has pressure at that end as well.
Right, and we heard from the Conservatives just a couple of minutes ago pointing out that we've missed the construction season this year at least. What else stood out to you from what the opposition's saying?
Yeah, the Conservative response, and this is sort of a version of what we've been hearing from them since Parliament resumed, that the federal Liberals are a bunch of failures who fail at everything except failing. And they consider this to be another failure for the Liberals coming out of what they've called the summer of failure. They criticize them for not being prepared to spell out what they're going to do on the Indigenous consultations right away. And they've also been critical for saying that it's taken this long to get to this point to outline yet another process, the findings of which aren't yet clear. Here's what critic Shannon Stubbs had to say.
What the Liberals announced today proves how little they care about getting energy projects built in Canada, and their announcement provides no certainty whatsoever.
So what the Conservatives are saying is that the Liberals should have brought in legislation immediately to ram through the environmental things and say that the Transport Canada's review of tanker traffic would have been sufficient. The Liberals were never going to do that. They say they want to respect this process, and they say you should have started the consultation process with the Indigenous groups already. Well, for those to be meaningful, they have to be done properly and they have to take some time. So the Conservatives are big champions of this pipeline, and they're going to use every opportunity they have, Rashmi, to say the Conservatives have failed on this, aren't moving fast enough, and there's no assurance of shovels in the ground, timeline to completion, and when people will get back to work.
All right, thanks, David.
You're welcome.